Charles Njonjo is dead. I have just taken time to go through his life history. And what I have realized is that his political career, both in government as a Chief Justice and as a minister, and finally coming out to resign when also as an MP, is one that the current politicians need to emulate. The few things that we should all try to emulate. And I have actually asked myself how he served in the two administrations, both from Kenyatta and also working with Moi, although he worked with Moi for only 4 years. He's a man of the Queen's language, and one thing that personally really attracted me to his story is also on his education. You know, he's someone who was really learned, being that his father was a provincial administrator. So in this video, I want to discuss on, I've decided to call it Prophecy, on his prophecy in relation to the current political situation. First, I think for people who don't have the information, Charles Njonjo was fine up until yesterday, and according to family spokesperson, he revealed that he passed on 2nd at 5 a.m. and according to his wish, or according to his will, his remains were supposed to be cremated, and they were cremated in Nairobi 4 hours after he passed on, and that one was according to his wish. Now, that is what happened, and of course after that we've seen messages both from ODM leader and President Uhuru Kenyatta. Now, according to the family report, is that he developed some breathing complication yesterday night. He was not taken to hospital, but of course prior to his death, he's been battling some old age ailment, and of course he breathed last. He rested peacefully when family was around him. Of course, we still continue to send our condolences to the family. Now, the first prophecy that Charles Njonjo prophesies to the current politicians that they need to emulate is you should always remain loyal to your boss. After he was appointed as a Chief Justice, Attorney General rather, I think I've been talking about Chief Justice guys, it's Attorney General. Attorney General is the chief legal advisor of the government and the office of the president. He served with Kenyatta up to until 1966, when Jaramogi Oginga Odinga resigned as a vice president after they fell out with Kenyatta. He continued to work with his boss. So his loyalty was seen in 1978 when Jomo Kenyatta was sick. Jomo Kenyatta died on 22nd August 1978. Before Jomo Kenyatta passed on, by then Attorney General was a very powerful person. Actually, if it was in the current constitution, Attorney General was advising government and also had execution. He could also execute cases. According to, I think, a report I saw, that Charles Njonjo could even sign detention orders. And if he wanted you to be detained, I think I saw one politician saying that if he wanted you to be detained without any reason, you could be detained. So when he realized that Jomo Kenyatta was sick, he petitioned, he actually passed an amendment in parliament that banned the general public from discussing the sickness of a sitting president. That was to protect the dignity of the presidency. It is also believed that having served, after Joseph Murumbi resigned as a vice president, then his position was taken by Daniel Moi. So Daniel Moi was the vice president to Jomo Kenyatta. After the death of Jomo Kenyatta, there were some elements or some powerful politicians around the presidency that did not want Daniel Toroitich arap Moi to assume the office. But he came out and defended the constitution. That look here, the constitution says that he's going to assume for 3 months, after which a general election will be held. So he defended the constitution by then, and it is Charles Njonjo who made Moi actually become the president. So that is very critical aspect. Another prophecy that Njonjo, we can also see from Charles Njonjo, is always shelve your ambitions when you are in government. Whatever is happening to politicians now, these are things that have ever happened. After Charles Njonjo retired as Attorney General in 1979, he went and he became a member of parliament for Kikuyu. I think it was in a by-election after the incumbent MP also resigned. And I've been wondering why by then, guys, leaders, members of parliament could actually resigned and became I think I'm missing it. When he resigned, when he retired, President by then, Toroitich arap Moi, in a cabinet reshuffle, introduced him back in government as a minister for Constitution and Home Affairs. I think something like that. But then, in 1982, when he was in government, he was the minister, I think, of Constitutional Affairs, Justice and Constitutional Affairs. That is when the coup d'etat happened. So after the coup d'etat, Moi became so rough, and he developed some mistrust. The people that were around him, he now started not trusting these people. And what Moi did is that he was implicated in that coup d'etat, Charles Njonjo, because as a minister, so there was this issue of we are doing investigation, we are trying to figure out, then his name was dragged into it, then he had to resign. One of the reasons why Charles Njonjo was implicated in that coup d'etat is because he had also shown ambitions that he wanted to vie for presidency. You understand? And that is why Moi did not really made sure that he could be fixed out of government. Now, this applies even to the current ministers or people who are in government. If you want to go to leave the civil service, public service, and go to seek an elective post, and you're still in government, I think you should just make sure that your ambitions are not yet known, because there tend to be repulsive forces within government to stop you from ascending to power. Example, let's think of Matiang'i. Maybe if Matiang'i wants to be the president, and assume that he's working close to deputy president, who also wants to be the president, do you think they are going to have, let's take example Matiang'i. Matiang'i wants to be the president. Do you think they can have peaceful, they can run government peacefully with deputy president? And of course, if a deputy president will have the powers, he could even sack him. So the issue is, when you have ambitions in government, always shelve them. Another point or another prophecy is, don't ever relinquish power voluntarily. The only politician who resigned from parliament and came back and won is Raila Odinga. So Charles Njonjo in 1982, after he was implicated in that coup and he resigned from government, that was the moment he went for political oblivion. He did not come back He did not seek any elective seat, and of course, his political career ended there. This is because people tend to think that if you resign, then you're like, you don't want. He only tried to come back to the limelight in 2006 during the Orange versus Banana constitutional reform, where he came out and teamed up with Raila Odinga, Mwai Kibaki, Kalonzo Musyoka, and the rest to oppose the Wako report. I think the Wako report now, that was the first draft. So that was the only moment where he came back. So between 1982 to 2006, Charles Njonjo was nowhere. Although in 1997 he was appointed, I think, chairman of Kenya Wildlife Service. But then politically, if you resign from government, don't dare. And people who have been telling deputy president to resign, this is not something that you'll do, because if you do this, you dig your own grave. Lastly, is another prophecy is always gel. Even if you're a civil servant, always gel with your community. Charles Njonjo, people have been wondering, because when Daniel Toroitich arap Moi picked him as still the Chief Justice, Moi was wondering how Charles Njonjo, who was never in good terms with the Kikuyu community, would go back to Kikuyu and be elected as a member of parliament. This is because he went back and gelled with the community. Even if you are working in government, for example, we normally see nowadays, Fred Matiang'i is a very powerful minister, but we'll always see him going back to the community in Kisii and identifying himself with the community, because the next day when you will not be a minister, when you want to vie for a governor or a senator or an MP or an MCA seat, you'll always go back to the people, because the power belongs to the people. So that is something that is very critical. And I want to give a good example. A good example is Charles Owino, who was a police spokesperson, I think, in 2015, when Raila was doing Firimbi operation, or rather the IBC must go. And by that time, he was talking so ill about Raila Odinga, and he was not in good terms with him because he was in government. Now in 2022, when he announced that he was going to vie for Siaya gubernatorial seat, I think the community turned hostile against him, telling him that when you were in government and you are needed best, you did not push the interest of your community. I'm not trying to encourage tribalism here, but what I'm only trying to say is that if you look at the life of Charles Njonjo, even if he was Attorney General for that moment and he was serving the government, the president was a Kalenjin, and he was in the inner circle of Daniel Toroitich arap Moi, he still gelled with the Kikuyu community and became a very powerful opinion leader from the Kikuyu community. So that is also something that is a prophecy that now the current politicians need to emulate. Lastly, guys, if you're a politician, always pursue education. Always pursue education, because there are things that electorates will elect you because of euphoria, because of political party, because of the manifesto. But when it comes to executing your duties or just achieving your goals as an MP or the elective seat you seek, you need to be educated. I think education gives you the expertise. This Charles Njonjo was learned and highly learned. So that's why you see, even after working as Attorney General and resigning as an MP, somehow he came back in 1997 and was given an elective post. So never underestimate the power of education, even if you have the political power. Because you can be an MP, but for you to be elected a minister, if ministers are to be elected from MPs, like by that time it was before this constitution, you will actually realize that your papers really matters. So even the education of Charles Njonjo is a very big inspiration to him. I don't know where you might put this, but I saw people online talking about why he married at 52 years after Jomo Kenyatta pressed him and told him, no, I am tired of being advised by a bachelor. I don't know how you look at it. At the end of the day, for me, I think this is just something that we can look. I don't encourage people to maybe to get married at 50, to marry at 52 years. But at the end of the day, he had a family and his life moved on well.